I was frustrated that I couldn't find the kind of book that I was looking for, which, look, I started writing this a long time ago. It's embarrassing to say how long ago exactly. This has been a 10 plus year project. And if you remember 10 years ago, which some of you might not, there wasn't that much queer epic fantasy. And there wasn't any Asian queer epic fantasy, I think. So it really came from that place of I want to write. Well, I want to see a full Asian cast, like in the TV dramas, because I was obsessed with them. They're so addictive. All the twists and turns. They're very melodramatic, big emotions. But in Asian TV at the time, we also didn't have any queer content. So I was like, okay, I'm going to write it. I'm going to make it gay. Let's just have fun with this. So I guess that's the part that I was bringing. A lot of big feels was what I wanted. I also come from a romance background. So I wanted to bring that to epic fantasy as well. That sense that it's very character driven stories. It is about people connecting or failing to connect. A bit of internalized homophobia and transphobia, just all the juicy stuff that makes people feel uncomfortable and makes the characters have a bit of angst.
Hello and welcome to this special author interview for FanFiAddict. I'm Frasier Armitage, part-time robot, full-time nerd, author of New Yesterday and Time's Ellipse. And joining me today is an absolutely fantastic author whose debut was a smash hit. Their follow-up is brilliant. It is the Radiant King of K-drama historical fantasy, Shelley Parker-Chan. Shelley, it's lovely to meet you. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Your first book, She Who Became the Sun, amazing. Love the title. So good. Your follow up, He Who Drowned the World, again, love the title. So good. And this duology, for anybody who's not familiar with it or anybody who is intrigued by those titles and thinks, ooh, what's this about? Could you give us like the pitch for what this duology is?
Yeah, I like to call it a queer reimagining of the rise to power of the founding emperor of the Ming Dynasty in China. So it is based on a real life person, but I just go massively off piste with history and have a lot of classic C drama type fun. There's a lot of intrigue, battles for the throne, backstabbing, love, death, tragedy, the works.
Yeah, that's perfect. In terms of, I know as we as writers, what we put into our books is sometimes very different to how we talk about our books. Um, I would love to know what was it? What parts of yourself did you put into these books when you were writing them, and what parts do you hope that readers will connect with?
Aw, you're a fellow writer, so that's one of those good, tricky questions. I don't think I've been asked that exactly in those words before. Um, well, I did write it because I was frustrated that I couldn't find the kind of book that I was looking for. Which, look, I started writing this a long time ago. It's embarrassing to say how long ago exactly. This has been a 10 plus year project. And if you remember 10 years ago, which some of you might not, there wasn't that much queer epic fantasy. And there wasn't any Asian queer epic fantasy, I think. So it really came from that place of I want to write. Well, I want to see a full Asian cast, like in the TV dramas, because I was obsessed with them. They're so addictive. All the twists and turns. They're very melodramatic, big emotions. But in Asian TV at the time, we also didn't have any queer content. So I was like, okay, I'm going to write it. I'm going to make it gay. Let's just have fun with this. So I guess that's the part that I was bringing. Um, a lot of a lot of big feels was what I wanted. I also come from a romance background. So I wanted to bring that to epic fantasy as well. That sense that it's very character driven stories. It is about people connecting or failing to connect. A bit of internalized homophobia and transphobia, just all the juicy stuff that makes people feel uncomfortable and makes the characters have a bit of angst. So that's my little personal touch to the genre.
Yeah, and I think you totally smashed it because the feels are powerful as you, and not just in the first book, but especially in the second. This second book, He Who Drowned the World, I feel like it goes into some really emotionally complex places with a lot of what the characters are doing. Um, what was the experience of writing that for you? Was it a difficult book to write, or did you relish sort of getting involved in that web of all the complexities?
I thought this would be the fun book to write because I do love a big emotion. I do love melodrama. I love sitting there listening to my emo metal music. Everyone's got their big feels about, my life is the hardest in the world kind of thing. But then the pandemic happened, and I was stuck in my cupboard, this cupboard, writing the world's saddest book about the world's saddest, angstiest people, just crying alone in my cupboard during the pandemic. Yeah, it was not a great time, actually. I was like, too close, too close, too many bad feels. Everything's very dark. I know why cozy fantasy took off during that era. And I was like, I'm writing the opposite of a cozy fantasy book. I'm a sucker. This will never sell. I was very sad about everything. But, I'm proud of it in the end because it was long and it was difficult. And, it did feel pretty personal. Some of the feelings that some of the characters had as they grapple with, the bad choices they've made, how they feel about themselves and their identities. Um, yeah, so a worthwhile journey, but a pretty miserable one during the writing thereof.
Oh, I feel like it was worth it because what you have come up with is something that is going to resonate with a lot of people, hopefully. I mean, it certainly resonated with me in lots of different ways. So I feel like hopefully it will have been worth all of that angst and the misery of writing it. But do you feel like as a writer, the stories that you tell, that do you already have an idea as to what those stories are going to be before you write them, or are you one of these people who sits down and then kind of discovers what it's going to be through the process?
I did have an idea vaguely of what I wanted each book to be about, but I did discover a lot along the way as well. I have a fantastic editor at Tor, and I remember I'd written the first draft, and it was sort of this second book, and it was mostly there. And he asked like three very simple questions, and I was like, oh shit. What is this book really about? Sometimes it just takes someone asking you, like, what is the point of this? And you're like, oh, okay, have to think about it. Oh, okay, this is what it's actually about. And in the second draft, you can sort of lay in those themes a little bit more clearly. And they were there all along, so drifting in the murk. But it takes a few more drafts to actually sort of pull it out. And you don't want to be too messagey. My books are pretty messagey. They, I feel like I err slightly in making my books a little too didactic sometimes. I worry about this. Um, but yeah, I do want to say something with my work as well. It's not just a popcorn escapist story where, there's deaths for the lols. I did actually, want to say something about queerness and solidarity and coming to terms with, one's own responsibility and actions in the past. Fun stuff like that.
Yeah, all of the really light, easy to read stuff is like no, it's
Yeah. Well, next one will be cozy, I swear.
yeah. I can't imagine a cozy Shelley Parker-Chan book. It's because these books have been so monumentally, um, just so profoundly deep and so what's the word? Um, I guess they challenge so many stereotypes that we normally see in this type of fiction that as a reader it's a very subversive read, and because you don't really know how it's going to work out, you don't know where it's going, and there's a great deal of catharsis in the eventual ending, but in terms of sort of the read itself, it can feel quite sort of heavy in the nicest, most complimentary possible way I can put it across. Because it's not a difficult book. It's not one of those books where you're slogging through it. But in terms of the gravitas of the book, do you when you wrote it and you hit sort of like the final key, did you feel that importance of it? Did you think, yes, I've set out what I wanted to do with this. I've reached the place I wanted to go here.
Yeah, I think overall I'm pretty happy with how I landed it. Like, I wanted it to have that epic Chinese TV drama feel. They have a certain rhythm and a pattern, and it is pretty deep and they are pretty melodramatic. And often I'll be like, I'm not in the mood to sit down and watch 80 episodes of Cry Fest, But when they're done right, the crying can feel pretty good when you're in the right mood. And I feel, like I landed most of those feels successfully, got people to where they needed to be, mostly stuck to history. Yeah, job well done. I mean, not to say it couldn't be done better. Like there are always bits that you would want to redo, but oh man, Samantha Shannon. I was talking to her recently, and I can't believe she rewrote. She's rewriting her entire first series. I don't know if I'd have that in me. It's that's a pretty monstrous task.
Oh yeah, if you were to set out and you were to go back to the start of this journey and start rewriting it, man, that would be what a feat that would have to be to be to. But I can't imagine being written better because the style that you write in is so gorgeous to read. There's so many subtleties about the imagery that you bring in and these metaphors that run through the whole thing. Like the metaphor of the sun in the first one, the drowning in this one. Um, when you're writing, does that style come naturally to you, or is that something you've had to learn?
Yeah, I'm a pretty visual writer and I tend to think in metaphor, and it really is a matter of reining it in. My agent was pretty good at that. Like, you don't need to have quite so many wild metaphors and similes and so forth and so on. It just comes out that way. Although I have found I'm writing my current one in first person, and then you're much more stuck in the voice, so I can't do those same metaphors and similes, and the language is a bit different. Um, yeah, I've never taken any formal writing classes, and I really didn't know how hard it would be to write a novel. So I really think that not knowing how difficult it's going to be is a great way to start a book. Just launch yourself into it, see how you go, learn along the way, figure out at the end of the first draft, like, oh shit, I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, I think you need a bit of denial to get you through the beginning of such a difficult project, which was definitely how I started it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so true. I think, yeah, the denial is a powerful writer's tool. I think it's in the
Yeah, you have to
toolbox.
believe the first draft will be like a Pulitzer Prize winning work and it'll be perfect the first time. And like, obviously, it never is, but I think you have to believe it to get to the end at least.
Yeah, definitely. With regard to sort of getting to the end, obviously this is like a sequel, so now this story has come, because it is a duology, it has come to an end. Um, when you were writing the first book, did you feel as though, oh, actually, this, I know what this next book's going to be? Was it always intended to be a duology? Were you always going to have He Who Drowned the World to follow She Who Became the Sun?
When I started it, so 10 years ago, trilogies were really big in fantasy. And for some reason, everyone was writing trilogies. So I'd planned a trilogy. Well, actually, first I planned one book. So I really resisted writing original fiction for a long time. And my friends dragged me in. They were like, no, no, you should try and write a book. I was like, okay. And quickly realized that books don't hold a lot of plot compared to TV. And the amount of plot I had was just insane. I had thought it would be one book. My friends just laughed, like, it's going to be a trilogy. So I sold the first book, and you kind of never know what the publishers will want. So we sort of designed the first book that it could be a standalone if they only wanted to take a chance on one. Um, and I did get some offers for trilogies and some for a duology. And the publisher that offered the duology was the one who grasped the whole concept much better than the other publishers. So I was like, well, that's how the cookie crumbles. It's going to be a duology. So I was just like, squish, squish, squish. That's why the second book is 30% longer than the first book. And maybe the structure is actually a little weird because the whole third act of the second book was going to be a standalone book. But I think it's probably for the best to have made it just two.
Yeah, I think so. I think it works really well as two books, and I think that the way that the final act unfolds would have been a. I mean, it would have been great as a to have that more, but I feel like the pace that you brought into that final act and the tension of the climax of this big epic story was just right. I felt like you got it spot on, and I feel like if it had been a longer book, that same kind of tension that you're reading as the reader to, you're turning every page thinking, um, I feel like that would have been diluted somehow. So yeah, I think good call on making it two.
Well, yeah, and then you get to avoid the saggy middle a bit. And also, I'm lazy, so actually, I was really enjoying like having finished my series when my friends are still slugging along on their third books. So I was like, and I'm done. It was actually quite a nice feeling.
Was it nice to write a sequel where you weren't having to establish the world so much as you do in book one?
I didn't think it would be a cakewalk because of that. I was like, I already know the characters. I've set everything up. I have a broad sense of how it's going to play out. And yet it was still really difficult. I think every book is difficult in its own way. So it wasn't the plot that was difficult in this book so much. It was the characters, just sort of fully understanding their arcs and slotting them into what needed to happen. So yeah, like in some sense, like I had learned a lot. I knew how to write a book now, which was a great help. With book one, I had no idea. That's why it took me 9 drafts. So with the second book, it took me less drafts, but yeah, I still struggled.
Yeah. What kind of things did you learn that you wish that you could have gone back and spoken to sort of like Shelley pre-writing the second book about, through writing the sequel? Was there anything that you learned about sequels that you thought, oh yeah, I can use this again for the next one I try?
I'm not sure I learned anything specifically about sequels, but I'm definitely learning how to manage character arcs better and set those up properly. I remember when I wrote the first book, I didn't really know. Um, I didn't really know you had to start low and end high, or like have change along the way. I came from a fan fiction background where you don't have to build characters yourself. You just come in, they're fully formed, everyone already loves your character, and then you just write a story. Um, and usually they're romances, so the engine of the story is quite different. So epic fantasy and building characters from scratch was a whole new game for me. And I think I recently wrote a short story, and it took me. I'd never written a short story before, and it took me 30,000 words to figure out the 4,000 words that I needed. But I do feel like I learned a little bit about how to build characters more effectively than previously.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of characters, let's talk about them because, there are so many characters and so many, like you say about the arcs that they go on, and each one has a really satisfying arc to their journey and to their story. Is there one that you are drawn to, one of your characters that you've created more than any of the others?
I like all of them. All of them have a little bit of me, I reckon. So otherwise, I'd find it very hard to write them if I couldn't empathize with them. So I did want to portray them all sympathetically, even if they're horrible people. When you're in their point of view, I wanted to try and get the audience to understand at least where they were coming from and why they made the decisions that they made, even if we're all like, oh my God, it's a bad idea, like totally don't do that. Don't you see this is going to be dreadful? But I did like Wang Baoxiang was the sort of new point of view in this second book, and he is the the title refers to him. He's the Prince of Angst, I guess. I thought we had a lot of angst in book one with the eunuch general, but I think in this one, our bitter scholar takes the cake in terms of pure angst. Um, I actually had intended to have him more in the first book, but I had a lot of points of view and it was getting cluttered. So I took him out of the first book and I was just sort of saving him for the second book. And I knew I'd have a lot of fun with that kind of character. Um, I guess I share a lot of his history in certain ways. So I was like, yes, you have all my childhood memories in a sort of fantasy version. So I do feel for him quite a lot. Um, yeah, and he was fun to write because I think he had more of a sense of humor than some of the other characters.
Yeah, I think that there's a great deal of about the Prince of Hina, and I think that he is very he's portrayed in a very visual way, with the way that he moves, with the way that he sort of, even his gestures and everything like that is very effeminate, and that is yeah, the way that other people see that and other people judge that. But it makes him really easy to picture. Like, you don't just see him standing still, you see him in motion, so it really cements into your imagination in a different way to maybe some of the other characters. And I feel like the way that you told his story, um, you kind of, it's more powerful for that because of the things that he ends up doing in this book, because you can see him not just in a picture form, but you can see him moving. Did you feel as though, with you being such a visual writer, were you conscious of making this physicality about his character, you know, fundamental to his journey?
I do want to make sure all my characters are embodied. Like, I think, especially given a lot of the themes of this series are about gender and bodies and perceptions of the bodies that we are in, it was really important to me to make sure they were all like physically present in each scene, that they occupied a body that is perceived in a certain way, that they use in a certain way, deliberately or unconsciously, and had a lot of fun with that. Like I think I read a lot about this in my spare time. I don't understand anything about dance, but I enjoy watching it. I enjoy thinking about what bodies can do. And Wang Baoshang was a character who I think more consciously than some of the others. Ju also does this. She uses her body very deliberately as a tool, as a weapon. She is very cognizant of how others perceive her body and can use that to her advantage. And I think Baoshang does that in a similar way. And like the way I was setting up this book, I think it sort of came about in the second draft, but I discovered all these commonalities between the pairs of characters. There would always be similarities that sort of emerged, and it was fun to sort of tease those out. So Ju and Baoshang, playing with people's perceptions of how they look and then subverting that with their actual identities or their actions. But to some degree, all of them do that. I guess Madame Zhang, the courtesan character, like she is always perceived in a certain way as well, and she's maybe more constrained by it than the other two. But yeah, it was fun to play with.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you mentioning about pairing characters, because it does feel as though there is similarity between opposing sides through the book. So you have characters who are on the opposite sides of what each of them want, but you see that they're the same. And it felt it was the same with the general eunuch, and completely different in what they want, but very similar. And do you feel as though those kinds of similarities between the characters is something, because quite often when we told to write characters, you say you try and make them different from one another, because then it's easier for the reader to follow, for them to invest in one rather than other. It was really interesting reading something where all of the characters were so similar, but they were still so distinguishable from each other. That's a real skill to be able to do that. Was that a conscious thing, or was that just something that just happened naturally, do you think?
I did want to make them all different, but at the same time, I was quite conscious that they are all exploring the same set of issues. So they're all a little facet, or they're a little mirror onto bringing a certain angle onto the same set of issues, which is gender and performance and identity. Um, so I did have to juggle a little bit to make sure they weren't too similar. Um, I think the way in which each of them reacted, like they had sort of a identifying vibe. So, you could hopefully keep them separate in your mind. Like, oh, Young is very angry, grief stricken. Baosheng is actually repressed. Ju is quite flippant. Madame Zhang has her own set of issues as she grapples with femininity. Um, but I guess they're all queer people, or gender non-conforming, and that is the commonality between all four of them. And I did want to explore the possibilities for solidarity, or like the missed opportunities for solidarity, and it sort of brings that I mean, the genre I'm writing in is tragedy, or the tragic romance. So the irony of missed opportunities, the dramatic irony as the engine. Especially when you're playing in history, you kind of know, or some of us know how it ends, or you kind of know how Chinese history tends to end, which is with everyone dead. So you're sort of waiting for that, and there's a lot of foreshadowing and dramatic irony to sort of like push you along to that point. So it was sort of fun to do that. But yeah, I guess the key thing I was trying to get at though with this book is like that feeling of being a queer person and thinking you're the only person like me in the whole world, and then you find you're not. Then you find there are other people like you, and it's such a precious moment. And that is why Ju is the protagonist, I guess. Like she's that one who always thought she was alone, and then she finds, oh hey, there's a whole world of other people um, there, and whether or not they recognize that sort of lends the tragedy element.
Yeah, the bit that I connected to with Jew particularly was this almost need to change the world, because the world wasn't built for certain people, and everyone deserves a place in the world. And I feel like that was the thing that particularly resonated with me. I think with the world that we live in now, if Ju could see it, what do you think her take would be on the world as it changes and as it continues to change? In our present.
Yeah. um, I don't think Ju is a very pleasant person actually to bring into our current reality. She's a purely cathartic figure. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy of someone, who could single handedly bring about change, which I don't think is possible, actually. I think we do need a community to bring about change. This fantasy of the single person working by themselves. The history of great rebel leaders and emperors to be doesn't usually actually result in a more inclusive world. This is just me playing, having fun, a what if, creating an. Hmm, I'm not a queer theorist, but I did read an interview by Judith Butler the other day, and they were saying the need to create like alternative imaginaries. It's just like the possibilities for freedom. I think that's what I was just trying to do in this book. I'm not actually saying this is how it was. I'm not saying that this is how we should affect change in our current world by like having a person just literally break everything, smash it all down, burn it all down. Um, but just sort of like, oh, let's imagine freedom. Let's have fun with that.
Yeah, and I think that that's it, the freedom to choose. That's something that I think is becoming more and more accepted in the world. The fact that we all have that freedom, or we all should have that freedom to choose things for ourselves. I think that's a something that when you look back through history, is something that is becoming more and more talked about, at least, which is a positive thing in many different ways. But in terms of the things that are sort of, with regard to the characters and things that, you might sort of not bring them into the world or the present, but just bring them into your world, Shelley. Um, what like, you have some authors who say, "Oh, I'd love to go out for a coffee with some of my characters, and just like have a chat and that kind of thing." How do you think your characters would react if they were sort of brought into your cupboard, as you called it, and they were? What do you think they would say to you for the things that you put them through in these books?
Well, well, I understand them better than anyone. I would be a very sympathetic ear to their woes because many of their woes are my woes. You know, I love them all dearly. Actually, I spent a lot of time ragging on Ouyang, which I actually feel bad about because a lot of people he is their favorite character, and I'm like, oh my god, he's the worst. He's a misogynist dickhead, and he deserves to. Anyway, I can't spoil the ending. Um, yeah, and then I saw people's faces crumple, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean that." It's just a kind of self-hating thing. I understand he's had a very difficult life, and he's making some relatable bad decisions. Would I want to know him in reality? Would I want to go out and have a coffee with him? Oh my god, no. Um, but yeah, I mean, Uh,
It- it's
yeah,
all good, Shelley.
I like them all and I understand them all, but I don't think we'd actually get along.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
quite
it's
annoying.
it's all good, and it's in some ways those are the characters that are the most endearing and enduring. Are the ones that you wouldn't necessarily have very much in common with them if you sat down and had a chat, but at the same time that you still see something in them of you. I think those are the characters that stand the test of time in literature, maybe better than others. So I don't think, yeah, I think your character work is just it's amazing. I think it's great. I want to talk to you a little bit about the research that you did in this history and the time periods and everything, because you appear to have done so much history and research for when you started out writing this. What were the things that you left out of book one that you were really glad that you could put into book two in terms of all the research that you did?
Oh, um, well, I like the fact that you came away with the impression that I had done a lot of research because I'm not an expert on the period at all. When I started this project, I didn't even know when the Ming Dynasty was out of all the dynasties. Like, if you'd said to me, "What years does the Ming Dynasty run from?" Like, I don't know. So I'm not a Chinese scholar. Um, my primary form of research was just watching a lot of TV. I did live in Asia though when I was writing this, so I did have the opportunity to go to many glorious museums in Taiwan and Singapore. But I don't have that kind of imagination where I can look at an object or like they actually had some of the emperor's robes like hung up on like a stick, the little tree that they hang them on. And I can't imagine that on someone's body. I find that quite difficult. So I'm actually much more inspired to watch TV. And I'm like, everyone in this book is wearing polyester. They all have beautiful hair. They have historically inaccurate hair. I will die on that hill because the historical Mongol haircut was very unflattering. It's like bald down the middle with like little tufts and then like little braids. It's ugly. So I was like, no, we're doing the TV version where everyone is hot. Um, but yeah, I do like going down a research rabbit hole though. I remember book one was really fun because it was all the monastery and the monks kind of thing. And I love monks. I love reading about monks. I read a lot of personal accounts of people who had just gone off to live in like some Zen monastery in like the Korean mountains and were eating nothing but barley for months on end. And I just enjoyed the privations and the hardships that they talked about. Um, book two was all the palace stuff. I would really wanted to write a palace drama. So I really enjoyed describing the insides of the palace, what the city looked like. I mean, that city is obviously still there in various forms. Like many cities have been built on top of it, but some of the walls are still there. Um, it's the imperial city. Yeah, the city, the Mongol capital, Dadu, is sort of you can still see the walls and stuff. And a lot of the beautiful things from that palace are now held in Taiwan in their museum there. So I did get to see the glass and the carved jade and things like that. So it was fun to populate that in the world.
That's so cool. I know I'm the same as you, Shelley. I absolutely love these C dramas and K dramas and the aesthetic of it and just the feel and the atmosphere of these things. Was there, when you were watching all of this TV, was there one that really like stood out to you as being like outstanding, or one that you would be like, right, okay, this is the one that I want to do in book form? This would Was there like your favorite one?
So it's old now, but the one that I not based this on, but the one that sort of spurred me to wanting to write something in that vein. It's called Scarlet Heart, and I think it's from 2008. It's a Chinese drama, and it features the a Qing dynasty emperor and the succession struggles. It's an emperor, the Kangxi emperor, and he had 14 princes, and 14 is a buckload of people to keep straight in your head, but the alliances were amazing. The switching back and forth between the brothers who are by different mothers, and the loyalties they have, and who gets chosen as the heir and then loses the position as the heir. And then it all features this modern day girl who's like fallen back into history, so she knows how it's going to go down. And her foreknowledge dooms them all, basically. It's very juicy, very enjoyable. I was just like, I've never had such big feels in my life. I cried, I had a great time. And it went so hard on the historical torture elements. Um, like absolutely gut sickening stuff that the protagonist does, because he is the you're following all these princes, and you gradually realize, if you didn't know already, which one is going to be the emperor, and he just gets more and more tyrannical and brutal till he's boiling people alive. And you're like, oh, he was hot, I really liked him, I guess this is what emperors do. So I did have a nod to that drama in one scene in my book where someone is boiled alive. Just for
Yeah,
just for fun
just for the
times.
lols. Yeah, like you said earlier, it's all good.
Yeah.
Because this is such a passion of yours, these kinds of dramas and everything, and this was such a passion project for you. Um, do you still have that kind of passion for these kinds of dramas, and do you still have that love for it now that you've spent so long writing and immersing yourself in this world that you've created?
No. So that's why people always ask me for my favorite recent recommendations. I'm like, I have not watched a Chinese drama or a Korean drama in a very long time. I watch the occasional one, but I had that big time commitments as well. And I just kind of, well, also what happened is they became really popular in the West. They gained this whole new fandom, and now the translations of the light novels are available in a way they weren't back in the day. And it has made it a very different environment for people of sort of Asian background to sort of re-navigate this explosion in popularity in the West, with a whole bunch of new fans from a whole range of different cultural backgrounds, sort of exploring this material together. And like I sort of missed jumping on that bandwagon, so now it's too late. Now I've gone in a different direction.
Yeah, and as well, it would have been, I think, pigeonholing yourself to one particular niche genre means that you're then stuck in that genre forever. So it's good to explore as a writer, isn't it? Different types of stories and different things until you can keep growing that way. But I feel as though if this were to be adapted, you can so clearly see it in your head. These books, sort of what they would look like and everything. Um,
That will never happen, but it's
yeah,
nice to think it.
yeah,
But I guess the thing is that's really exciting is there's so much Asian fantasy now. Like, when I was starting, the whole reason I wrote this book was because there wasn't much there. There was like Kenlu, there was Zen Cho. That was about it. This was before the Poppy War. So, I was really riding into the void, being like, oh, here I have this wacky project. And now, there's been such a, the market is hungry for these books, and there's a huge variety, and really showcasing the fact that there isn't just one kind of story, obviously, that comes out of Asian authors of fantasy. There's so many different little subgenres that we're all writing in. So I feel like my work is done. I can move on to other stuff.
yeah, yeah. And it's nice. It's nice to have been ahead of the curve because it means that people who are now finding this genre that they love, they can now find your book and think, oh, okay, yeah, this was the OG of these kinds of stories. This is, and it's is it kind of nice to have spearheaded that into sort of a more mainstream market, to have been there and to have had that popularity, and all kind of been responsible in some way, I would say, for bringing it to people.
I think the real um, damn opening person was R.F. Kuang with the Poppy War. Like that was, and I remember I've heard her say that the books weren't a mega smash hit straight out of the gate. It was really word of mouth as people were like, oh, hey, here are these books. They're amazing. We want more of them. Just gradually building, showing the publisher that there was demand, then getting the publisher's backing, oh, hey, actually people want these books. Let's support them more. So I was really lucky at the time my books came out. I think I was sort of just really benefiting from Rebecca sort of having paved the way. Um, yeah. So just it's luck of the drawer, as with anything in publishing, I reckon. You can't control it. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's
way
I'm
too
just
slow to write to the trends. So
no, I'm the same. But it's timing is everything with these things, and you just hit it just right, Shelley. It's great. What I want to talk to you about, because you mentioned about the translation of other works into English, but your work has been translated into multiple different languages. Have you um, learned anything about the perception of your work by through that process of seeing it translated, or is there anything about these translations that you're thinking, oh, okay, yeah, okay, this group of people, this culture see it this way, or this has anything come from that where you've learned something new through that process of translation about the stories you told?
hmm. Well,
I'm
it has
asking you
been
all the
translated.
easy questions today, Shelley. Just the easy ones. Yeah.
Well, I don't think actually I've been asked. This is good. You're asking me many new questions, but it's meaning I'm having to think about it a bit. Because people are like, oh, your book has been translated. How did that go? But not really like, what have I learned about the other cultures that are consuming this work? And I guess the answer is I don't know much about that aspect of it because I don't really see those or interact that much with those audiences because they're reading in a language that I don't speak. But it is interesting to me that the only countries that have wanted it in translation are primarily not Asian countries. It doesn't surprise me. It's interesting. Like obviously China doesn't need my story back because they have their own stories of exactly the same type, and it is quite politically a hot potato. So I never expected it to be translated in China. Um, but yeah, I was kind of like wondering, like, oh, Indonesia, do you not want my very gay, fantasy book? I lived in Indonesia. I was writing this book, so I guess I was always like hanging out for like maybe one day there'll be a Indonesian translation, but no. So I don't know what it is. Whether it's just like it's too adult, it's too queer, it's too whatever. I don't know. I don't know how all the elements of my book have been preserved in the translations either. I have not had any contact with most of the translators because I understand they're done in such a hurry by these poor like, expert translators who are only given like 3 months to translate a whole book. But as far as I'm aware, the translators are not of Asian origin. So I'm like, oh, is everything coming across like at all? I don't know, and I don't know to what degree the queerness has been preserved, but I know it's a mystery. I can just hope.
Is it changed traveling for you? Going to different countries and thinking, oh, there's a version of my book that's in this country's language. Have you had that experience yet?
Well, I did have the privilege of going to France and meeting French fans, which was really fun. Um, and like France has its own entanglements with Asia, but it was interesting. I think people are less familiar with Chinese stories specifically than audiences in Australia. So it was quite interesting to sort of be like, oh, this is where you're at, and bridging that in conversation. And hopefully my book is helping contribute to the like, oh, here's like one kind of story. You'll become more familiar with our culture this way. Um, but I come from a fanfic background. Everything's like a transformative work, so I don't really consider the translations of my books to be my book anymore. I'm like, have at it. It's loosely related to what I wrote. I hope you enjoy it. I'm not
That's
precious about these things.
that's really cool. With your fanfic background, what was the fanfic that you were writing?
You could never ask a fanfic writer that.
Oh
That's
yeah,
a
go on. What?
secret. No, because as soon as you say a combination of fandoms or what era you were like working in, people will know who you are. So, and then that takes the fun out of it.
I
So,
didn't
no.
realize that was taboo. I'm sorry, Shelley. I just wanted to find what you were passionate about and what you loved.
Well, actually, because of my rather unique work background and the countries in which I've lived, it is surprisingly easy to find out who I am as a fan fiction author, and people have done so, but I'm not going to go out of my way to make it easy for you.
Yeah, don't spill the tea. Don't spill. It's all good. Just keep the tea firmly in the teapot. In terms of the covers, because I know that like these covers are just amazing, and it was so nice to read the paperback because you're feeling sort of like the cover is kind of like slightly almost like embossed, so that
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's a lovely, lovely sort of thing to have in your hands. How did you feel when you first saw these two covers together?
So these are the UK covers, the ones that you have experienced. So it's the dragon and the phoenix. So I I don't think I requested the dragon, but obviously it was like the perfect choice. Very imperial, very masculine. Yellow, of course, for the sun, also a very imperial masculine color, and I liked that juxtaposition against the she in the title. So when it came to book two, I was like, obviously we need it to be a pair, it needs to be a contrast. So we've got he in the title, so it needs to have the feminine colors, the dark colors, the water, which is, female signified in Chinese mythology, and the phoenix, which is always the female pair of the male dragon. So you can hold them up, and the dragon's looking at the phoenix. So, when I saw them, I was like, oh, it is the pair. It's perfect. Very classic. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the UK covers. And the first one was designed by Mel Four, who, because she was an Asian designer at Macmillan, like just instantly understood the aesthetic. She was like, "Here you go." I was like, "I have never been so happy. It's gorgeous."
Yeah, that's really cool, and it is good. They are gorgeous. I could look at them for ages. Just looking at all the details that's been put into the phoenix and the design and everything. It's brilliant. Um, the thing I want to talk to you about, and I've kind of saved it for the end, is I struggle as a writer to sort of when it comes to my endings. I'm always worried that they aren't landing hard enough. You absolutely nail the landing. I mean, the ending of book one was great, but the ending of book two is just perfect because you nail everything in it's such a satisfying resolution to the things that you've built up to. What tips do you have for writers who struggle with writing endings?
Actually don't know if I'm the correct person to ask on this, because I have, in hindsight, thought that I ended it too sharply. Like I didn't have that little epilogue of what happens after, because I'm lazy and I don't like to think of the mess after the triumph, like it ends on a very triumphant, clean note of finality. But then I have heard people say they wanted to know, that little bit extra of what happened after. Let's just follow the characters for a few beats longer into the new world and see where they land up. Um, Yeah, so my approach was like, the rocks fall progressively harder and faster, and keep that pace, like keep events happening closer and closer together until you're like panting with dread and breathless, like, and can't breathe. And I think for some people that was too much, and you do need a little bit of a breather. But like, sort of each to their own, I guess. Depends what genre you're writing in. But that was my approach. You just have set up all your events and then detonate them, one by one, with increasing force and destructiveness, which starts from, in my book, the 2/3 mark. So I was like, right, at 2/3, the shit goes down, and then it really kind of never stops going down until the end.
Yeah, I felt like it was I really felt like it was such a like breathtaking ending, and I feel like you ended it at the perfect place because naturally you want to find out what happens next, and you think, oh, but I think leaving that to the reader and letting the reader imagine that is kind of partly, in some ways, the whole point of the book. That you've got this change that you can then absorb that doesn't need to be seen because you're feeling it. I absolutely thought you ended it in the best possible way because you leave so much up to the imagination as to this sort of the change in the world that is going to happen later. But in some ways, that's perfect in tying in with the theme of the book. You know, you just end it right, and then you let the reader imagine that change and absorb it for themselves. And I just thought it was perfect. So yeah, you nailed it. Um, in terms of, for those people who really enjoy the book, for those who read it and who think, yes, I really want to thank Shelley for writing this. This is awesome. Where can people reach you these days on the socials and on, you know, your websites and things? Do you have anything like that that you're still active on?
Yes, isn't that a question for our age where we're still active? I'm currently on Instagram, where I only use the stories function. But if people want to DM me, I'm usually around for a chat. I also have a contact page on my website that does just email me. So I will always get that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today, Shelley. And again, big praise for these books. I feel like they are monumental. I feel like they are important, and the themes that you explore in them are so rich and kind of universal, you know, because there's a lot for everybody to pick up on through these books that is important. So yeah, congratulations and all of the best with what you're writing next. Could you give us a little like hint as to maybe what's coming? Because you mentioned something cozy, you sort of earlier on.
Oh,
Any
that's a
more
total
details
lie.
you can
No,
share?
yes, I will not be writing cozy. I actually do really want to write a sports romance because to decompress, I used to watch a lot of reality sports shows like the Formula One show, the Tour de France show. So, in my heart of hearts, I want to do a sports romance. But I am writing a secondary world fantasy next. It's based on Dante's Purgatory. Um, but there's a lot of like evil angels, there's a lot of expiating of sin, there's a lot of it's really about abused female dancers and ballerinas. So I guess we'll see how it goes. But it's all my usual concerns of bodies, gender, fucked up power dynamics. Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. So we'll see how it goes.
It sounds like a very light and cozy read, that's for sure.
Yeah, you have to wait for the romance for the light and cozy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shelley.